agree on.
Yeah, I hear that. Dan, we haven't really heard from you much on the show yet, but I want to ask you, everyone, I'm going to ask this question. You've got to premise these things so people get really angry online because the brains don't always work. This is me asking a question, not a statement. So toast to people, relax. Is there an element when it comes to Mo Salah of recency bias? When it comes to and we're talking about multiple other players, is there a recency bias issue here? And maybe there's a lot of people online talking about Mo Salah who are like Will, that have been watching football 10 years and didn't watch Henry play, didn't watch Giggs, didn't watch Drogba, didn't watch Lampard, didn't watch Gianfranco Zola, Eden Hazard, you know, and the list goes on and on and on. Is there a chance here that this is recency bias sort of clouding the waters of this debate?
It's hard to say. I mean, Salah obviously joined the Premier League and his first season was unbelievable. So, and we're talking about, he's been here quite a long time now. So I feel like he's been performing for a long enough period of time to remove recency bias from the discussion, even though I feel like if we're looking at just what he's doing this season alone, I think this is arguably the best he's ever looked, or potentially I think he looks that good. So no, I don't think so. I think he's been great, to be honest with you. He's done better than I ever expected him to do from when I saw him in the early days when he was at Chelsea in the Premier League. I thought he was a player that would probably never cope with it. And he went on to prove a lot of people wrong. Even some of the best footballers, best managers doubted a player like Salah. And I think he's gone on to prove them all wrong. If people are sort of blaming it on recency bias, then honestly, I don't know what sort of levels they thought these other people are at. And then maybe you could argue that there's a nostalgia bias to it, potentially, that they're comparing him to these players, suggesting he's nowhere near it. He's been absolutely fantastic, to be honest with you.
I think, I mean, obviously I want to stay, but I think if you're talking about like legacy, because a lot of legacy is to do with storylines and what you can sort of write around that. Mohamed Salah signs a 2-year deal at Liverpool, which takes him to 2027. He would have been in the Premier League for 10 seasons at Liverpool. He could have a level of arguably unmatched consistency in that time, of pure numbers, of pure goal-scoring feats, of pure creative levels across a 10-year stretch, which would, you know, longevity. I know Giggs has incredible longevity, but in this recent era, there has not been a player who has maintained such a consistent level of longevity where every year, regardless of if his team's performing well or if they're performing poorly by their standards, he produces the same numbers. He has the same impact every single game.
I mean, you keep forgetting about Wayne Rooney. Like, that's the only reason a reason I'm not challenging you, Tom, because you prefaced with him staying longer and winning more. So it's hard to argue that fact, because if he does, sure. But for me, obviously, like, I'm going to bring up the greatest debate of players. It's LeBron, MJ right now, right? And everybody always points to one thing. It's championships. At the end of the day, Rooney's got 5 league titles. Like, that is not that is a ridiculous amount of league titles. He's played.
If that's the case, then Ryan Giggs has got 12 or 13.
I understand. No, I understand.
Bill Russell argument.
But I'm saying when we look at like longevity versus not just when we bring the stats, you bring the championships, you bring it all together. Now the one thing that separates those two players, because obviously Salah's got better goal scoring, he's got better stats in that sense, but not by like insane margins based on the position.
Yeah, but then Cam, Steven Gerrard is widely regarded as one of the best midfielders in the Prem, right? He's not got the numbers. He has got numbers, but he's not got the best numbers from a midfielder. He's not got the most amount of titles, but he is widely regarded by many as the best player to play in the Premier League in the central midfield role. So it isn't always about titles.
I think not for everybody, but typically people that don't include the problem with the title conversation is that people always want to misconstrue it, because they'll go, oh, you know, Luke Chadwick's got a Premier League that make him better than Gerrard. That anyone who makes the argument that it's just about having the trophies is a moron. But equally, what I look at when it comes to the trophies is why I don't think I'd have Harry Kane in Premier League terms in my top 10 strikers. And I'll tell you as to why. Because I didn't see, compared to Aguero, Henry, Salah as attackers or strikers.
Sorry. Say that again.
Are you winding Henry up?
You don't need me to say it again. I'll keep speaking. You'll understand. So when you look at Rooney, Andy Cole, Ian Wright, Henry, okay, you look at Didier Drogba, you look at Aguero, you look at Erling Haaland, you look at Salah, and you look at Mane, and if you look at Alan Shearer as an example, I saw those strikers deliver in multiple seasons where they're in title races. And I think
Are we saying Salah and Mane are strikers? Because I'm not saying they're strikers.
I said strikers and attackers because they're not wingers. They're not wingers like Ryan Giggs and Beckham and these type used to be who starting McManaman was, who were right side and left sided midfielders. So they played as deep as central midfielders do now, and they attacked. Those players were more akin to what we've seen from a Trent Alexander-Arnold. So the numbers aren't the same, but attackers. I always feel this, that when you're in those title races year in, year out, that is the pressure. Because what have we seen criticism of? We've seen a lot of criticism of Saka in the last few years. And everybody says, and Liverpool Spurs fans included, Henry, but what did he do in the run-in? But what did he do in the run-in? But what did he do in the big games? What did he do in the run-in? You can't have that energy towards Saka and then sit there and go, well, Kane's got to be up there with the best. Well, what he was rarely in a run-in to prove how good he could be. And I think the goals that Aguero, Drogba, Henry, Andy Cole, Ruud van Nistelrooy, I'm just naming them, the goals they scored in those title runs, the Henrys, the Salahs, I think they weigh so much more. It's why Drogba didn't have the greatest goal-scoring record, but the volume of semi-finals, big matches, and finals he scored in, those goals are valuable. So I do think there's, when you look at trophies, it isn't just having the trophy.
It's clear,
how influential you are in winning them. What's wrong with that logic, Henry? Go on, tell me.
Would you say Jamie Vardy's a better striker than Harry Kane because he won a Premier League title?
He's had a better career.
So again, that's a really good one. Vardy was in one title race and he delivered in it. So you could make that argument. But no, it was one title race. Say Jamie Vardy did in that title race season. Say the goals he scored since then were in title races, 3, 4, 5 years on the bounce. Then I'd say yes, he did it in one season. I saw Harry Kane score some goals when you guys were in a title race once. What I'm saying about Kane is I didn't see him do it enough in those massive games. And this isn't even a dig at Tottenham. It may sound like I know. I've seen my club like 20 years in title races every year. Those last 10, 15 games are so pressured. The players that step up and score, it's different. So if you're not in them, you're not tested in that. People used to say to me, Letizia is one of the greatest ever Premier League players. On ability, yes, but he was never put in a situation where he's tested with the highest level of pressure, the highest level of media scrutiny. That tells you the difference. And I think it's the same in all sports. You know, delivering in the Super Bowl is massive. Delivering in the big championship game is massive. It's different from doing it in the first few months of a season. I think when you're a fighter, that world champion fight, that world title defense against one of the greatest, it's a harder fight than when you're fighting at York Hall on a Saturday, on a Sunday afternoon. So I just feel like trophies are important, but it's how you helped your team deliver in them. And, you know, that's why Mo Salah's in the conversation, because look what he's doing in this title race. He's putting it to bed before it's even a fucking race in the running.
Does he lose marks for his period at Chelsea where he couldn't really get into the team?
Does Henry lose marks for his final 2 months at Arsenal where he was, you know, older and barred a goal against
scoring in the final?
Yeah,
Are we talking about when he came back on loan?
Yeah, but that was a period of time that happened, wasn't it?
Are we talking about 4 games when he's on loan?
But it was a period of time that happened. Salah played 11 games for Chelsea.
Yeah, it's not really comparable.
I think that's irrelevant. I think it's so
Salah
irrelevant.
scored against Arsenal.
That's a reach.
Yeah,
KDB, we don't talk about KDB's Chelsea days. Like that's so irrelevant. Like
I feel I look at that more as a knock at Chelsea, not recognizing what they had. Yeah, it's a good question. I look at it more as Chelsea made a mistake with KDB and Salah. They made a mistake.
I don't think Chelsea did make a mistake. I don't think those players were what they were. I think they had to go away to become what they become, to be honest with you. I think they had to feel rejection, had to feel not being wanted, had to find the hunger. I think they were very talented kids, but I don't think they were the finished article that has put them to the very top of footballing.
Whatever makes you sleep at night, right?
I don't think that was Chelsea's fault.
Do me a favour. Sell me Cole Palmer now as well with that attitude, please, bruv.
No, because Cole Palmer... No, but Cole Palmer's obviously at a young age come in and proven himself and was given the opportunity in the window. It's the same with Reece James, Tammy Abraham. The door was open for those players to step in, but the door wasn't open for De Bruyne, Lampard, Oscar, Hazard, Mata. They're all in his way. The same with Salah as well. There were other wingers, Willian, Pedro, Hazard, that were in his way of getting starting football. Cole Palmer walked into a team where Nkunku was injured and hasn't looked back because he took it by the scruff of his neck. I think De Bruyne was good, but Mourinho was a much tougher manager. You could argue the same about Lukaku. Lukaku first time round really didn't succeed at Chelsea when he was given a sniff, but he went off to other teams in the Prem and he took his opportunities. I think these were kids in a dressing room full of men and winners, and it was ruthless. And I think they had some growing up to do when they were there. And I think if you spoke to them, they'd probably admit that now, that they weren't ready to fight on the level that they've been throughout the majority of their careers.
I was just going to add one more thing to this, Terry. I think this whole debate about GOAT in any sport is an era thing. Depending on which era you grew up in, your GOAT can be different. So say, for example, the kids now growing up, they might say to themselves, their GOATs are the players that are currently playing. And when they get older, they're not going to mention the Henrys, the Alan Shearers, and everything else. Our generation, your generation, they're going to mention Henry. They're going to mention Rooney. They're going to mention these guys who played. And my kids or your kids or anybody else's kids in this panel, they might not even mention Mo Salah and these guys. They might have the next generation's player that they mention as the GOAT. So I think this whole GOAT debate is in the time, and generation on generation have different GOATs. But each person's greatest of all time in that era is difficult to compare them because games change.
You have to have eras. I mean, and I mean this with respect to Will. Will can't have a debate about the whole Premier League era. He's been watching football 10 years. So it makes it's crazy. I do think it should be split into eras, because I keep hearing on the overlap, they keep talking about like Beckham and Salah because they're both playing on the right. And it infuriates me that not a single member of the production team. In fact, I love Paul Scholes as a player. The fact that Paul Scholes' friend is sitting there and is saying nothing. And so it wasn't a right-sided. Beckham wasn't inside fucking forward on the right, was he? He was a right midfield player, a completely different role. Like, that's why I think the era things are there, because
you just said, Terry, they occupied like completely different areas of the pitch 90% of the time that they played.
That's true. It's absolutely true, and there's loads of differences in the sport now. So yeah, I do think eras should become a part of this. But Mo Salah is definitely up there. Go on, Kate.
Can I just counteract what you said about Harry Kane? Because he's the second. No, I'm going to put my 2 pence in. I've sat quiet.
Hang on. I said, of course you can.
No, I'm doing that to Tom because Tom's trying to.
No. It was just the Harry Kane bit. I was laughing at the take before it because I don't agree with it.
213 goals in the Premier League, right? Second behind Alan Shearer. And you say, but they didn't win anything. First of all, they didn't win anything because he was at Spurs. If he was at another team, he would have. But surely his goals then become more impressive because he didn't have the players that, say, a top team that are challenging for everything would have. Feeding him. No?
Good point. Holds water. He's a very good striker.
Your one team was amazing, to be clear, though.
Hang on. Sorry, Cam. Please let me respond. Sorry. He's a very good player. And he's a top striker. And I'm not belittling anything he's done. There's just a lot. There's a number that I would put above him, because I believe when you're doing it consistently in title races, and I do look at decision making. So if you've got a striker that doesn't quite reach the highest level and have the highest accolades because he eats too much McDonald's, that's a decision. He decided stupidly to stay at Tottenham as long as he did. He should have moved when he was 24, 25 to a better team to test himself more. And at the end of the day, there's a reason why certain players want to go to Liverpool's and Man United's and now Man City's, when Man United were good, that is. There's a reason people want to go to Bayern Munich's and they want to go to Barcelona's and they want to go to Real Madrid's, because the pressure is the pinnacle and the pressure is there. It's why every MMA fighter worth their salt want to get themselves to the UFC, because they want to prove themselves as the very best in the world. And I think for me, I'm not saying there's nothing about Harry Kane. I'm not saying he's a bad footballer. I'm not saying he's a trash footballer. I'm not slagging off anything he did. I'm not downplaying him. I'm simply stating that what I saw Eric Cantona, I didn't even mention him, what I saw Cantona do in the 5.5, 6 years he was at Man United, in those title races, in those run-ins, I think for me that holds a lot more weight than the extra goals that Harry Kane has scored, even though those goals are very valuable. I just think that they're worth so much more in my personal opinion. And I'm not going to say nothing negative about Harry Kane. I was glad when he left Tottenham. He's going to win a league title, I think, this year. And I hope he wins some more. I want Harry Kane to have winners' medals. I think he's far too good a football player to not have them. But my view has always been this, Kate. And you can disagree with my logic, and I'm really not sensitive about that. I view it this way. If you're going to get all the great Premier League strikers to go into a club, we're going to go to a club and sit on a nice table. I just look at what they've all achieved, and I'm like, how can Harry Kane, how did he get in? How did he get admission when you've got everybody sitting in there with their trophies and the goals they scored in finals and the great goals they scored in title run-ins. He doesn't have any of that. And for me, that's the iconic moments. I remember all the things that like Andy Cole did for Man United. That goal, I mean, there's loads that stand out. The goal in the semi-final against Juve. But that goal, that chip against Spurs, ironically, the final day of the season to win it, that goal will live on in, forget Man United history. In 100 years' time, that goal's going to get played because it led to us winning a treble. That goal, the legacy that comes with that is part of what I'm talking about when it comes to the top 10. It's not just ability, it's the iconic nature of it. And those goals in title run-ins, semi-finals, finals, lifting those trophies, they propel you to another level because they're remembered forever because of the history they create. So what I want to reiterate again is I'm not saying Kane's a bad football player. On ability, he's right up there. But I think when it comes to legendary status, more than ability has to come into it personally.
Do his individual
one thing
awards
on
not
that,
put him in
because
legendary
you
status,
mentioned
man?
the teams, Kate, and like that team, I think what hurts Harry Kane, I think what hurts him is not winning in that year where, because a lot of greats don't win because of a great player in their way or a great team. And you can always sympathize with that. Like, again, I'm always a basketball fan. I always bring it up on here. Like a Charles Barkley didn't win a championship because of Michael Jordan. Doesn't mean he wasn't amazing. But when I look at Harry Kane, the year that you should, Moussa Dembele, Christian Eriksen, Kyle Walker, Daniel, I can name that team. Dele Alli, I love that team. I remember sitting here as a Canadian being like, maybe I should have picked the Spurs. Like maybe I should have went with my brother. Like that team was so good. I forget who your center back pairing was. They were
Alderweireld and
Toby and
yeah, like you guys were so out of it. Yeah,
that team was unreal.
That team was unbelievable. So, and Son was there obviously. So to not win when you had that team and you had the year where everybody else was kind of like, they're thereabouts. I think that hurts him the most because that's when he should have dragged them to it. And if he won that league that year, we would all talk about Harry Kane as like, cool. The year that he should have, when he had that amazing team, he did it. And that's what I think hurts him a lot when we talk about GOATs, like for me, because that team was awesome. That team was so